the past was 324 or so people. And for this meeting, we shut off the registration when there were 500. The numbers in the first week were, I think most of the people that are, everybody that's here has been around at the meeting this week. The only thing I want to remind you of is the code of conduct, which is just basically be a good person and a welcoming place for opinions and ideas. We've got 3 speakers today from the ORCID Consortium and from ResCognito and from Make Data Count. So we're going to start without further ado with Sheila Rayburn from the US ORCID Consortium. So Sheila, take it away.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
One other thing, if you're not speaking, can you please mute so that we can hear Sheila clearly?
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. I'm Sheila Rayburn. I am the ORCID US Community Specialist at an organization called Lyrasis. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But basically, ESIP became an organizational ORCID member this year. And so I'm here to really talk about what that means and the different benefits that ESIP as an organization, but also all of the individuals involved can get from this organizational ORCID membership. So I'm pretty sure that everyone here knows what ORCID is. You probably have your own ORCID ID, but just as a quick recap, if there's anyone that doesn't know, or maybe you haven't thought about ORCID in a while, ORCID stands for the Open Researcher and Contributor Identifier. And it's basically, the ORCID ID is a free, unique, persistent identifier for individuals. What you're seeing on the screen is my ORCID ID, and it links to my ORCID record, which has information about me similar to, you know, what you would see on a CV or a resume, for example, like my education, employment info, and activities I've been involved in, funding I've received, that kind of thing. So the idea is, even if my name changes, or if I get a different job, or my area of focus changes, my ORCID ID will stay the same throughout my career. And then I also have full control over my ORCID data. So it's used across the globe by individuals. There are, I think, over 9 million ORCID IDs now. And they really just help to distinguish researchers from each other. And if you have your information populated in your ORCID record, like I do, then it can kind of lend a credibility to your work, so people can click on your ORCID ID and see your affiliations and your activities. So an interesting and cool example, I think, is on Zenodo, the recent uploads related to COVID-19 research. You can see that a lot of these authors have the green ID icon next to their names. So for those that do have that, you can click on that icon and you can see more information about who these people are, where they're coming from. So for example, if we click on this first author listed here, Juan M. Banda, that ORCID record has a lot of information in it. You can see where this person works, their past education, other works that they've been involved with. So it lends just that kind of credibility and context to where different researchers are coming from, and brings visibility and transparency to an individual researcher, and distinguishes individuals and creates that digital presence for researchers in their activities. So when you think of the very basic activities day-to-day of a researcher, you know, when you're starting out, you get a job and then you apply for funding, and then you do some research on the specific funded project and you publish that research. And this is a very, very simplified version of this kind of research activity life cycle. But you get the idea. And then over the course of your career, you know, you're expected to report your activities back to your employer, the funding agency, and it just gets more and more complex as you move forward with your career as a researcher. So ORCID really helps to streamline this process. So the organizations that are involved in the research and scholarly communication ecosystem are also involved with ORCID. It's not just individuals with ORCID IDs, it's also organizations that can connect with their affiliated researchers' ORCID records to maintain those connections and get information about researchers, but also assert information about researchers. So in this graphic, you're seeing an individual researcher in the center with their ORCID ID, and then their employer, the organization that they're getting funding from, and organizations that they're publishing through are all connected to this researcher through their ORCID ID. And so information can actually be transferred between organizations and individual ORCID records using the ORCID Application Programming Interface, or API. And that's basically what ORCID membership allows organizations to do. It allows organizations to connect with all of your affiliated researchers' ORCID records. So ORCID basically serves as a central hub for sharing information about researchers across the entire research and scholarly communication landscape. And ORCID does work like an ecosystem. All of the stakeholders that you're seeing here, and even others not pictured, need to participate with ORCID in order for everyone to benefit. And the benefits really have to do with interoperability of data across workflows and systems, where data can be entered once and then reused often. So with that, in the US, we actually have a national consortium of nonprofit organizations that are ORCID members. And this consortium is called the ORCID US Community. And so ESIP is now a member of ORCID through the ORCID US Community. And just to give you a little bit of background, this consortium was formed in 2018 as an initial partnership between all of the university libraries that were already involved in ORCID. And my background is in academic libraries, and so that's where I'm coming from. But at this point, any nonprofit organization can join us in this consortium. If you're in the US and you're a nonprofit, you can become a member through this ORCID consortium. So Lyrasis is the organization that is the administrative home of this ORCID US Community Consortium. And Lyrasis may be a new name for many of you, but basically Lyrasis is a member organization that provides services for traditionally libraries, archives, and museums, but also other related knowledge communities like ORCID. So as of today, we have 143 organizational members of our consortium. This map kind of shows you a general idea of where all of our members are located. Unfortunately, I can't show you Hawaii or Alaska because we don't have any members there yet, but there's a lot of room for growth still. And most of our members are universities, colleges, libraries. There's also a lot of overlap between our university members that are also ESIP members. So on the agenda for today's session, I think there's a list of all of those institutions that are both ORCID members and ESIP members. We also have some research institutes that are not affiliated with the universities, and we have some nonprofit research funders as well. We have a partnership with the Health Research Alliance, so it's a lot of health research funders that are getting involved. And then we have a few other other category research related organizations, and ESIP is one of these. So ESIP is definitely one of our more unique member organizations, which is great because with all these different types of organizations involved in the ORCID US community, we're able to bring all these different stakeholders together to really share and build a community of practice around ORCID in the US, which is one of the main goals we had for forming this consortium. So building a community of practice around ORCID, making it as easy as possible for organizations to leverage the benefits of ORCID, and really just help move the US research community toward widespread ORCID adoption. Of course, we've already seen a lot of success in the US with this, and also with similar initiatives in other countries around the globe. And so that's what we're doing with the consortium. So as a ORCID member organization, ESIP now has access to 5 ORCID member API keys for integrating ORCID with various systems that you're using. You also have dedicated technical and community support for any questions about ORCID. I am your dedicated support person, so don't hesitate to ask me any questions you have about ORCID. And also we have a number of activities and resources that we do kind of as a community. So webinars and community calls, we have a lot of how-to guides. All of our resources are really geared toward helping both researchers and organizations get the most value from ORCID. And so for ESIP specifically, there are a number of different possibilities of how ORCID can be used to benefit both ESIP as an organization and also all of the individuals that are affiliated with ESIP. So first and foremost, ESIP systems can now be configured to allow individuals to log in using their ORCID credentials, so you don't have to create yet another login for different ESIP systems. I know that there are already plans in place to do this for the ESIP Wiki, the Key Code Chat, and the data management training platform. This screenshot that you're seeing here is the ESIP Wiki. So you see there's a button to log in with ORCID. It works just as it would if you were to log in with like Facebook or Google credentials. So that will, leave the door open for more people to participate and kind of streamline your login so you don't have to remember a bunch of different login credentials for the different systems. So on top of this, ESIP can also use the ORCID API to collect authenticated ORCID IDs for everyone who's affiliated with ESIP. So rather than asking people to manually type in their ORCID number, if you're asking for that, participants can just go through a basic authentication process that will allow ESIP to retrieve the accurate authenticated ORCID IDs and will designate ESIP as a trusted organization on affiliates' ORCID records. And then you can display those ORCID IDs on websites and profiles and that kind of thing. What you're seeing here is just a screenshot from a search I did on the ORCID website. I searched for Earth Science Information Partners, and this is just a very small snapshot of the different people that already have ORCID IDs, have information populated in their ORCID record, and are saying that they're affiliated with ESIP. So, so this new API connection will make ESIP actually a trusted organization for these people's ORCID records. Building on this, ESIP can also use the ORCID API to read data from ORCID records and bring data from ORCID into ESIP systems. That can be helpful for a number of different purposes. If there are any workflows where people have to fill out forms about themselves, their affiliations, and their activities, ORCID data can be used to pre-fill those forms. And you can also kind of look at ORCID data either on an individual basis or in aggregate to do things like analysis of your community, who's involved, where are they coming from, where are they going, that kind of thing. So basically, as long as people have data populated in their ORCID record, they can transfer this data to other systems through the ORCID API by clicking a button rather than having to manually report on data. So a good example of this, some of you might be familiar with Science CV, which is a tool that NIH and NSF use for grant applicants to create biosketches. Science CV is integrated with ORCID in this way, so if people have data populated in their ORCID record, they can just click a button and transfer all of their data into the Science CV tool rather than having to sit there and manually type everything in again. So we're seeing increasingly systems are integrating with ORCID in this way. And another kind of cool example of how ORCID data can be used, this is from Science Magazine, where they in 2017, they just did an experiment where they took data from ORCID, location data, and were able to map out where scientists were moving from one country to another based on that ORCID data. So the actual site is interactive. If you hover over the different pieces, you can see where people are migrating to. So, but that's just one example of what you can do with ORCID data. And last but not least, ESIP can also now write data to people's ORCID records where the source of that data appears as ESIP. So I know that there are a lot of working groups, committee work, group work, and also the ESIP lab gives out funding. So these are all things that ESIP could add to people's ORCID records. So just some examples in terms of the memberships and service part of the ORCID record, you could write participation. Let's say you're part of the data stewardship committee. ESIP could write that information to your ORCID record for you, and the source would appear as ESIP. So it's kind of this very trustworthy assertion that yes, this person is affiliated with ESIP. And then other organizations, when they go to read this information, they'll see that ESIP asserted this. And so it just adds to the transparency of relationships between individuals and ESIP as an organization. And then I've got an example, this I just made up in terms of funding provided from ESIP to an individual as part of the ESIP lab. So these are some of the possibilities. Just to give a few other examples of how ORCID is being used by some of the institutions that are ESIP members and also ORCID members. Florida State University, for example, they have basically a faculty reporting system that they have integrated with ORCID, and so people can connect their ORCID ID and import data into the system from their ORCID record. University of Minnesota is doing something very similar with their faculty reporting systems. The ORCID API is integrated there, so people can connect their ORCID ID, import data from ORCID into the reporting system, but also write their employment affiliations and maybe works that they have in the system to their ORCID record. California Digital Library, also an ORCID member and an ESIP member, doing the same thing with faculty reporting, and then also with Dryad, ORCID main login option for the Dryad data repository. So this may look very familiar to many of you. And MIT is another example that MIT Press is asking people for their ORCID IDs. The campus is also using ORCID to generate publication lists from their affiliated researchers, and anyone who's associated with MIT can connect their ORCID ID to MIT, so they have that trusted connection. These are just a few examples kind of off the top of my head. So you may just look into other organizations that you're affiliated with to see how they're using ORCID as well. And also just to kind of end, the US government is kind of forming their own separate ORCID consortium. So right now they do have a consortium that's led by the Department of Energy, the DOE, through their Office of Scientific and Technical Information, OSTI. And right now it's mostly just national labs that are DOE affiliated labs. So if you've worked with any of these facilities, you've probably had to either submit your ORCID ID or you've seen ORCID somewhere in these workflows. There are a lot of other government agencies that are using ORCID in some way, whether they're asking for it in grant applications or publishing workflows, or displaying ORCID IDs. All of these are different organizations and federal organizations that are getting involved in the ORCID ecosystem as well. So that's just a little bit of info and update from me. What I will leave you with is that, basically ORCID is kind of a paradigm shift from manual, repetitive data entry workflows to more streamlined, interoperable, automated workflows and sharing between individuals and institutions. So the sciences have really been leading the way so far in ORCID adoption, but we're starting to see more growth into other disciplines as well. And really, we're just kind of looking to ORCID as the future of streamlined information sharing across the research ecosystem. So, later on, when we go into the breakouts, there will be an opportunity to, ask questions and brainstorm. Some of the questions that I have for you are things like, do you have your own ORCID idea already? Do you have any questions about it? What types of data might ESIP be interested in either reading from or writing to ORCID records? And any potential barriers or opportunities for increased ORCID adoption at ESIP.
Thanks so much, Sheila. Perfect.
Thanks.
And Sheila gave a little bit of a hint of our strategy. ESIP, as members of ESIP know, it's a collection of forward-looking people and early adopters for a lot of things. So as Sheila mentioned, I'm sure that all of the people here in this session and the vast majority at the ESIP meeting have ORCIDs. The idea of the session is we'll have 3 talks, and then after a talk, as Richard gets ready to share his screen, with Sheila, I think, yeah, you need to stop before he can start. Think about questions that you might want to ask Sheila, or ideas, more importantly, or equally important, ideas about how ESIP might help the US ORCID community increase adoption within ESIP or within the organizations that are part of ESIP. After the 3 talks, we'll have a breakout when Sheila and Richard and Danielle will have an opportunity to talk to breakout groups, ask questions, and take suggestions for how we might increase adoption. And then we'll come back for the last 5 minutes or so to brainstorm at the end and think about the takeaways. So the second talk is Richard Wynn. Richard is interested in how we can use ORCIDs as identifiers in order to share credit with people. And that's enough of a warm up. I'll turn it over to Richard at this point. And Richard, I'll come back, turn my video on when you have about a minute.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. My name's Richard Wynn. I'm the founder and CEO of a small but mighty organization called ResCognito. I've been working in scholarly workflow for about 30 years, most recently with a company called Aries Systems that produces a peer review system that's used by about 7,000 journals and processes millions of manuscripts per year. And it's based on that experience that I heard from literally thousands of researchers that they're very dissatisfied with the current process of publication, the publish or perish culture. And particularly early career researchers wanted something different. So when Aries was acquired by Elsevier about 18 months ago, I took the opportunity to start ResCognito to see if I could be part of the solution to that part of the solution to that problem. So I'm going to share my screen now and switch over to PowerPoint. So I'm hoping you can all see my screen now. So the question that I'll be asking you at the end of my session is, what value could research organizations derive from an improved research recognition system, and what would that look like for your organization? Each year, about $2 trillion is spent on research. That's money coming from private organizations and government organizations. And 10 million researchers, active researchers, do this work and generate a variety of research outputs. Some of those is code, new materials, new compounds, and those research outputs are evaluated with a 300-year-old process of publication, citation, and measures of impact. And that creates a signal so that research funders can then decide how to spend the next $2 trillion. So the quality of that signal is super important for ensuring that those resources of society are well spent and that we're able to solve our societal problems as quickly and as effectively as possible. But unfortunately, and I think many of you know this already, the signaling process is definitely suboptimal. One small example is that there's no incentive for publishing negative results. And this can cause research funders to reinvest in research which has already been undertaken in the past. So a significant part of the problem is that the current process of authorship designation is lossy and does not send a clear signal. Today, most research is team-based with specialized contributors. Lumping everyone together under the generic author label results in some people being over-recognized and other people being under-recognized. Important contributions such as software development and data curation are not sufficiently or accurately surfaced in today's authorship model. This review article is part of a growing call for a more granular view of authorship based on standardized taxonomies that identify specific author contributions. There is also growing questions about the efficacy of citation counting as a way to measure the value of research. The problem with counting citations and derivative measures of impact is that they do not address research rigor and may in fact encourage counterproductive behaviors. In this preprint, the authors correlated citation counts with measures of scientific rigor, such as the ability to reproduce studies and the incidence of statistical errors in published papers. Their findings question the validity and usefulness of citation data and impact factors as indicators of research quality. They argue that research evaluation should instead focus on the process of how research is conducted rather than counting citations. While promoting res cognito, we're often told that the infrastructure does not yet exist to make a successful transition. In response to this concern, we undertook some analysis of the availability of ORCID IDs in Crossref metadata. As you can see, there has been a massive increase in the presence of ORCID metadata in Crossref, with more than 50% of newly registered manuscripts, including one or more ORCID IDs. The average number of IDs per manuscripts is now over 2, meaning that IDs are being associated with co-authors as well as the corresponding author. Because research contributions are increasingly identified in this unambiguous manner, there now exists a strong foundation for improved researcher recognition. Let's consider what an improved research recognition system would look like. Here are some of the attributes that we thought about when building res cognito. It should be very easy to use. It should be open and transparent. It should be fair and democratic in that anyone can participate. In other words, not gatekeeper controlled, but gatekeepers should still have an important role. It should be verifiable and accountable. It should be granular, standards-based, and improve the signal that research funders receive about their investments. It should encourage and reinforce beneficial behaviors rather than gaming, and it should be interoperable at a technical level. For example, the ability to visualize information in different ways through a standard API, and it should be persistent. Now, in preparation for the breakout session, I'm going to describe 3 scenarios and walk you through those. The first one is the recognition of individuals for non-publication related activities. This would be something like teaching or positive public impact. And I'm actually going to ask you to log on to our system, not log on, but to go onto our system and do this form of recognition. This recognition can be peer-to-peer, or it can also be driven by an institution such as ESIP. The second use case will be recognition related to a specific digital object identifier, typically to a published manuscript, using a standardized taxonomy such as credit. And the third option, use case, will be making assertions using checklists. And the specific assertion we will look at is connecting data sets to published manuscripts. And one of the great benefits of this approach is this can happen after the fact as well. So I'm going to switch to my browser, and I'm going to encourage you all to navigate to rescognito.com. So I'll pause a minute so that you can go to www.rescognito.com. And when you get there, you should see a page that's similar to this. And when you arrive at this page, I'd like to invite you to type my name, which is Richard Wynne, W-Y-N-N-E, and then click the search button. So you'll notice that our system is free to use. It does not require you to register to use, but we will prompt you to authenticate your ORCID ID at appropriate times. This data is pulled from the ORCID API, and I am the second person in the list here, Richard Wynne, so please click on the View Ledger button just on the right. The Rescognito ledger is a place where the recognitions I have received are displayed. And this can take the form of institutional recognition or individual recognition. And my publications are also listed here, although they're not as mighty as yours, I'm sure, but they can be seen by the drop-down menu here, but I'm going to go back to all. Now, the thing I'm going to ask you to do now is to click on the Recognize button in the middle of the screen. And at this point, you'll be prompted to enter your ORCID credentials. And I'll give you a second to do that. Mine are already in the system, so that when I click Login, I'm automatically authenticating my ORCID. In your case, you'll be asked to give permission for Rescognito to see your ORCID ID, and I hope you will be willing to do that. Once here, you'll see a drop-down list of recognition terms. This is a taxonomy. There are other taxonomies in the system, and they're configurable. And it includes things like library support, mentoring. But for your recognition of me, I'm going to suggest you select positive public impact. There you are. And then click the Recognize Now button. And this will create an entry into the ledger showing that I've been recognized. So one of you at least has recognized me here. You can see that Mark has recognized me. He's identified by his ORCID ID. The reason that I'm being recognized is shown here, and the amount of recognition I've received from him is shown here. So this is a ledger view, but I can also visualize this in a graphical manner, showing the connections between me and other people as that recognition has taken place. And we'll come back to this view in a moment. So what I just showed you was peer-to-peer recognition, but we also support institutional recognition, where the person doing the recognizing is an institution. So we've had a small pilot project going with ESIP to recognize individuals for their committee work contributions. And of course, this is a flexible taxonomy, so it can include additional terms such as prizes and lots of other things. So if we go to David's ledger here and view it, we'll see that ESIP has recognized him with respects to this specific event. And if I visualize this, we can see that the two recognitions coming in for David. So that's the first use case. I'm now going to go on and discuss the second use case, which is recognition based on a manuscript. And to do that, I'm going to switch to our QA server because I'm going to be putting live data into the system, and I don't want it to appear on the live platform. But we can see David's ledger again, and we can see his publications. And if I click on the Recognize button next to this publication, the system will automatically, based on this DOI, display a list of the authors for this manuscript. And for each author, I can go in and identify what they contributed to this manuscript. such as formal analysis or data visualization or other terms related to this publication. And I can do that for other individuals as well. So I've now made some recognitions, and when I click the recognize button, these recognitions again will be recorded in the system. I'm not prompted to log in since I previously logged in, and the system knows my ORCID ID. And these recognitions are going to be displayed in this manner, where they're shown for the entire manuscript, or can be shown on an individual basis. So let me go to David's, and here we can see the recognition that David has received. So that's the second use case, which is recognizing someone with respect to a specific digital object identifier. And if I go back to David's ledger, we can see the 4 recognitions that I made for him. And if I click visualize, we can now see that I recognize David as well. Now I'm going to move on to the third example, which is making assertions about a manuscript or a digital object of any type. And in this case, I'm going to make an assertion about the data availability for this particular object using the data availability checklist. So we can configure any number of checklists that allow just the contributing authors to make assertions about this manuscript. So for example, I can identify some sources of data related to this publication. I can add those links. And in this case, because it's on our QA system, I can make the recognition, but on our live platform, only David and his colleagues would be able to make that recognition. And so now I'm going to proceed with that recognition, and we'll now see that the form has now been completed, so that other people now coming to David's ledger will see that he completed a data availability checklist for this manuscript, and that can be visualized and recorded. So they are the 3 use cases. So I'll just switch back here. So in conclusion, in this presentation, we reviewed the urgent need for an improved research recognition system. We explored some of the desirable characteristics that a new system would have. And then we considered 3 live use cases to illustrate how this could be implemented today. And I'm looking forwards to your feedback on this question in the breakout session. Thank you very much for all your time.
Oh, Richard, this is so, it's very exciting to me to see the progress that you've made in ResHackNito since the first time I saw it, which I think was in January or maybe before that. I think it was in January at Pitapalooza. So as I mentioned before, if we have more questions for Richard or equally important responses to his questions, we'll be going into breakout sessions in a minute or after Daniela's talk. And the participants now know well how to get into appropriate breakouts. In the chat, I put up, and I'll put up again, the identifiers that we'll use for breakouts. So if you are interested in going into a breakout with Sheila to talk about ORCID, please put an O in front of your name. With Richard to talk about ResCognito, put an R in front of your name. If after Danielle gives this great exciting talk about make data count, to talk to Danielle, put an M in front of your name. And Megan will then use those identifiers in front of your names. And so Richard and Sheila and Daniela, you can go over to the right of your name, and for others who haven't done this, to the right of your name and hover, there will be a more option there. And when you click on that more, you get a rename option that will allow you to put the appropriate letter in front of your names. I'm counting on you guys to go to your own breakout sessions. So maybe we don't even need that because Megan can get that right. But for other people, we'll go into those sessions to talk to Sheila and Richard and Danielle about how we answer the questions that they've asked, and then we'll come back for a couple minutes at the end. And really remember that the goal is to try and take these cool ideas and move them forward. In ORCID applies to individuals. We have a lot of individuals in ESIP. So as I said, many have ORCIDs. Res Cognito works either for organizations or for individuals. Many people in ESIP are also involved with repositories, either running those repositories or contributing data to those repositories, or using, reusing, and creating and citing data. Danielle Lowenberg from California Digital Library is one of the leaders of the Make Data Count project, which is it's related to the credit things that Richard was talking about, but for data sets. And she's going to tell us about Make Data Count. Welcome, Daniela. And you'll see my video again when you have about a minute left.
Sounds good. Thanks. So as Ted said, my name is Daniela. I'm based at California Digital Library. You may have seen me in other sessions this week because I also am the product manager for Dryad, a couple of different realms here. I wanted to start though, I can still see your names. And so can you put like a clap emoji or a thumbs up emoji in the reactions if you've heard of Make Data Count before? Okay. It helps to understand how much baseline here. So for those who have heard of it, some of this may be information you've heard, but I'm just going to go through it. There are a lot of global efforts related to the components of data metrics. ESIP has been integral in many of these with the data citation principles. I know that we have Mark on the line who led the research object cluster talks this week and in general in that group. Make Data Count itself is an initiative that I'm going to focus on today, though. And Make Data Count is an initiative to build the building blocks for research data metrics. And so we had started as in 2014 as just a couple of different organizations with the goals of building the infrastructure for data metrics. As of actually this month, we now have a much larger team here that you can see the logos of. And the ones that you may not be as familiar with towards the bottom are the organizations of bibliometricians in Germany and in Canada that have joined us. So not only are we thinking about the technical infrastructure now, but also the bibliometrics and social infrastructure to get us to a point of having data metrics. And so I put tiny URLs here if you want to read more about kind of where we're headed on the project in general. These are the press releases from the recent round of funding that we received for both of these projects. But in general, really focusing still on driving the technical adoption and then starting to do bibliometric studies, which I'll touch on in a second. And so thinking specifically about the ESIP community, I know some of you that are on the line work at repositories and other as scientists and other forms. Specifically for data repositories, I just want to reiterate 3 steps that are really important for us to get to a point of having data metrics. So the first is that we wrote a counter code of practice. And for those not in the library world, this is a code of practice that's used typically for journal articles and books to standardize and normalize views and downloads, events like that, at a published interface. And so folks in the ESIP community, Matt Jones, Dave Lieglis, myself and others wrote a counter code of practice for research data. And so why is that important is because we actually want to trust where these numbers are coming from for views and downloads. If we look here at a screenshot from Zenodo, all we see is numbers. We see these across the disciplinary repositories, general repositories, anyone that's hosting data, we can see these views and downloads, but without actually knowing that they are normalized, it's a little harder to trust what we're seeing there. And I want to point out that we don't actually know what any of these numbers mean yet. It's why we need bibliometric studies to do qualitative and quantitative research on what the meaning of views and downloads are across all scientific disciplines. We know that we shouldn't be comparing, say, what's happening in one part of earth sciences to another because of the different disciplines. There just may be different norms. But it is important that regardless, we have some sort of a normalization of what these numbers are. And that countercode practice is really focused on things like removing bots that are just spamming the site and inflating numbers, or people trying to game the system like that. And then the third part of that, and really the most important, what I'm going to spend time talking about, is actually reporting this to a centralized aggregation space. And so in our case, we're working with DataCite. And so we ask that any repository that is doing this report these usages to DataCite for a centralized aggregation. And I think something that Ted and Bob Downs had brought up in a different session was, what about if your stuff is mirrored across multiple sites? Are you using the same DOI? And so that's something that's really important here, is that, say in the example of Dryad and Zenodo, they are mirrored by Figshare and others. It's very important that everyone's reporting and then pulling this usage from the same centralized spot, so that we're not showing researchers different feeds, not really convoluting what the message is of what that usage really is. So that's the world of data usage, which is very focused on technical infrastructure for repositories. I'm happy to talk through any of that implementation more and give links if you want to talk in a breakout or after. Then looking at data citations, ESIP has been involved in this, of course, kicked it off with the 2012 data citation guidelines that contributed to the joint data citation principles. And obviously data citations play a huge role in what's going on. There was a recent infrastructure interview with folks from Crossref and DataCite that I recommend looking at. But one thing that I think can be really confusing about this is that we talk a lot about citation, which, with the caveat, still needing bibliometric studies. We don't know what citation means across disciplines. We don't know if it's the correct indicator for data. And one big part of this is that we don't really have the adoption that we need for data citation. And so one thing that I think can be a little bit jargony that I wanted to parse out is that there's a word called Scholix. It's an RDA working group. Scholix, we like to say, is not a thing. Scholix is just a protocol for how you can get things to Crossref. And so on our end, we're not really building the technical side of data citation. We are really focused on the broad adoption of publishers and data citation. And so that's something that I would love for the ESIP community to get involved in, especially in the earth science journals. And so thinking about, well, what is data citation really? And this is a figure that Matt Jones had authored for a book that we wrote, showing that there's different ways of citing data. So we've often talked about it as just an article citing data, but there's also data citing data, data within data, and the various different ways that that's possible. And so obviously, this is a screenshot from Dryad of how this can all work and look great, because we can pull these citations back when publishers index them from Crossref. We can then show reference cited lists of all those data citations for it. But this is not what's actually happening in reality, which is the tough part about all this, and why we need an entire initiative, and why I'd love the ESIP community to get on board to be advocating for this. So what we're really seeing is an example here. This was an article written by folks in 2015 who were involved in Make Data Count with a different name. In their article, we can see here that they cited the data set with the data DOI. It was in the UC data repository at the time. And then when we go and try and pull it back from Crossref, and I've left out a screenshot of the Crossref XML, it says there's no citations, even though we know there's over 9 citations to the survey data. And so what's happening is publishers are actually not indexing these citations. And it's really that we would love for them to follow Scholix and the Crossref guidelines. And so there may not be publishers on the call today, but I think it's important that the ESIP community understand what is kind of the root of this problem. And I know Shelley Stahl is on the call as well, and she can also speak a lot to this as well. And so, really getting to what are we really contributing to here? And the big thing is that we want a large central ecosystem that we can all work from. And so this is another image from a book that we wrote, and I'm going to kind of go through two parts of it here. But the point is that if we work in a really big central open system, we can meet the needs of researchers, funders, institutions, libraries, publishers, but also have it be very open, and so that it's auditable and we can understand where counts are coming from and that they're normalized. And then this also provides a corpus for bibliometrics researchers to go in and start to do these studies. And so if we're looking at kind of just the beginning of it, which is the submission part, we can note here that researchers are depositing data, they're writing articles. Articles would be great if they could index those data citations. They're sending them to Crossref. Repositories can report their citations, standardize and normalize their data usage, send it to Crossref and DataCite. We can then have that corpus there. And then on the receiving end, aggregators, and I know there's a lot of aggregators in the ESIP community, can also report their usage, pull back, show that, and then we can all be displaying these numbers and other events that we care about so that researchers, funders, institutions, everyone can have access to these. And so we really believe that this framework is required for us to get to a point of having data metrics. And so I will say a bit different of a take than the last talk, and maybe that a lot of people think, but from the Make Data Count perspective, we would say that we do not yet have a credit system for data. And as I just walked through, we barely have adoption. We have about 9 repositories plus the Data One network who have standardized against the code of practice, which is great, but we would love for thousands of repositories to do this. And we don't have publishers sending data citations, so we're not fully showing researchers what is there. And so without even having that adoption, we can't even get to the point of having bibliometrics research to understand what it means. And so to get to a point of having credit, we really need every player to get involved in this and get to that point. And I think Katrina McCollum, who has led open science advocacy for most of her career, points this out really well, that if we jump too quick to call something credit for research data or say we have metrics, we can start to have perverse consequences here, like in the article world. And we really don't want to jump to something too soon, like an impact factor for data. And there are a lot of those discussions that are happening where people believe that is a good stance. And so we would really prefer to go about this in a scientific way and make sure that we're aligned with researchers' needs. So just in closing real quick, how can ESIP community get involved? If you're a repository, standardize, normalize your data usage against the code of practice, and then aggregate this. If you're not a DataCite member, that's fine. Just standardize your data usage and then display it at your repository. That's also great. Publishers and repositories, report your relationships to other works so that we can have a more connected ecosystem. I'm realizing as I was rushing through these slides, I forgot to mention the whole point of having an aggregated system as well is that if we're all sending metadata like ORCIDs and RORs and funder registry and all these different persistent identifiers, we can actually do these aggregations not just on, say, a scientific discipline, but everything that's funded from USGS, from this institution. What does that data usage look like? And so that's why it's so important that we're all implementing these best practices and then networking them. And then the last is that it takes everyone for advocacy for data citation implementation. And so the reason that I didn't talk much about researchers is because until we have that framework set up at all publishers, we don't want to expend too much energy getting researchers to understand data citation practices because we don't want to lead them astray and then not have a system support it. So we have a website, makedatacount.org. Open data metrics will lead you to a book that some members from this community and others that you may recognize that where we kind of go into this more. It's a free ebook, and I'm looking forward to talking about more ways you can get involved. Ted, I think you're muted.
I was just saying that you did a great job of cruising those slides. You know, when you sent them to me last week, I was a little bit nervous, but I've seen enough of your talk, so I knew you could make it through. I think we're going to stay with the original plan of choosing a breakout with one of the three authors. I put into the chat the breakout identifiers again: O for ORCID, R for Res Cognito, and M for Make Data Count. I think everybody knows how to to add that, prepend that identifier on your name, and Megan will be organizing us. The speakers were so incredibly prompt and wonderful in their timing. We'll have a little bit more extra time, which will build into the end after the 20-minute breakouts to have a more discussion, and maybe remember the hope is that we can find things that the ESIP community can do in any one of these tools to try and increase adoption. Sheila made the important point that ESIP is now a member of the ORCID community, so we have advantages that she talked about and capabilities that she talked about. She mentioned the login to the ESIP wiki, which has just had an amazing revamp and come forward 10 major media wiki versions. So the ESIP wiki is much more up to date. But at this point, we'll just take a minute and we'll get some, we will cruise into breakouts with Megan's help. Breakouts will be 20 minutes. As everybody knows, there'll be a timer that'll go down to 19 minutes. And then you'll have 1 minute before you are broken out of your breakout into the main room.
All right, so I will open up the rooms and send those who've already indicated, and then I will talk with the rest of you and see if you would like to go into a breakout room and help you get there. And if anybody wants to come back and go to a different one, that's also a possibility. I'll just be in the main room. So,
Megan, can you start me in O?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, you all should have a little pop-up inviting you to join the breakout room, including you, Ted.
ESIP and the Federation is a long story that some of us who have been around for a while. Karen's going, I don't want to hear about this anymore. Know that, but anyway, the official name of ESIP in ROAR is now correct. It was updated by the ROAR group at CDL, where Danielle is from and who is a member, and also updated in the GRID database that is currently from Digital Science. So we made some progress in ROARland with ESIP. And with that, I'll just open it up to general discussion or important questions or ideas for moving forward with these identifiers in ESIP. We've got about 5 minutes left, and we can go longer if necessary, but so general questions or answers or discussions.
Well, I will pipe up and say that in the ORCID breakout, there were a lot of questions about, different platforms that people work with. I know I pasted some information about Google Scholar and ResearchGate, for example, in the chat, but also questions about, like, as an individual, how do you manage your ORCID ID and how can you make it easier for you? So if it would be helpful for the ESIP community, I would be happy to at a future time, give a workshop or something that actually talks about like how to use your ORCID record as an individual, or if you're working with researchers, how as individuals can benefit from ORCID, and how to make sure you have data in your ORCID record.
Okay, yeah, I think there's we've learned a lot about the virtual meeting approach, and I think Megan would be the person who would organize such a thing. Mark Parsons is here, still here, I think. There he is. And Mark did the research object cluster meeting the other day, and I thought this is his first exposure, I think, to Res Cognito. So Mark, you have any ideas?
Yeah, we started to chat a little bit in the breakout. So what we were doing with the research artifact citation cluster this time was looking at how the credit taxonomy that Richard mentioned applies to artifacts other than articles. So data sets, software, instruments, semantic resources, etc. I think the jury's still out, and made us think that we need to think about these taxonomies a bit more carefully. And so we had some good discussion in our breakout about the different types of roles and how those might be credited. And Mickey's doing work with USGS in sort of standardizing some of this for data sets. And it seems to me, just thinking off the top, that maybe we could start to think of codifying some sort of taxonomy for roles in earth science data. And that maybe that plugs into Res Cognito in some way. Ultimately, though, my head's kind of swimming. We got ORCIDs, we got RORs, we got credit stuff now, we got Scholix. We are trying to count data in the right way. This is it's wonderful. It's this ecosystem of persistent identifiers, but it's trying to get your head around it and what to do. The most useful thing to do in the short term is a little overwhelming, but I think there's a lot of possibility. Muted.
Yeah, I think we've been talking about identifiers for a long time, and I think what we're seeing is that things like we've seen today are so we're a vision 10 years ago, and now they're starting to come to fruition. I asked a question in the ORCID breakout, and I was surprised by how many people answered it with no. There is so working with, we've talked a lot during this meeting about public-private partnerships, and partnerships with developers and organizations and companies and projects that are doing cool things for ESIP are really important. One of the things that maybe has been mentioned a few times during the meeting with regard to KikoChat, our new favorite tool, we're working closely with Lucas, the chief developer of that, and he's implemented some improvements during the meeting. Some of you have noticed them. But another thing that the KikoChat has is these profiles for members of the ESIP circle. And if you go to the little blue button in the upper left-hand corner of the ESIP summer meeting, you can go back up to the ESIP circle and click on members. And then I'm going to share something here. I'm going to share. I'll just share this desktop. Don't worry about a messy desktop. But so in the ESIP circle, it says ESIP on KikoChat up here, and I got here by going up here on the other page. And down here is members, and this is where all of the information that we put into our profiles lives. And so one of the things we've been thinking about with ORCID is the mechanism for using ORCID profiles to get some information, interesting information into this about skills that people have. This is the map of where everybody is. But when you click on skills here, you see a crazy network diagram like Richard was showing for Res Cognito. These are for the members of ESIP that put skills into their, I don't even know how to make this bigger or smaller.
There's a view full screen here,
Oh,
but
yeah,
it's
what is
very
that?
hard. The whole thing is kind of hard to navigate.
Yeah, as usual, network diagrams work well in small sets. But anyway, this is just something I wanted to point out that we may be able to do again with ORCID profile information. And somewhere in here, I saw myself floating around.
In the middle, right there.
Okay, and so if I click on myself here, nope, that doesn't work. So I'm just going to go back here and back to profiles, or I can click on my picture here and go to my profile. So this is the information that I filled out, and these are the skills here that are making connections. So getting a consistent vocabulary for these skills, and then populating them somehow from the ORCID profile. I mean, it's clear if we can get them in the ORCID profile, we could populate them. And then they would help us find connections across the increasing breadth of ESIP. So I think that's sort of a cool idea. I'm going to stop sharing at this point. Anything else? Any questions for Daniela or Richard? I think everybody, the slides, we'll have the slides on Sketch that have emails. And I know that Danielle and Richard and Sheila would love to hear from ESIP members. And thanks again for coming. And I think there's exciting times ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity, Ted.
Yeah, my pleasure, Richard. We'll talk.
All right, good.
Okay.
Bye-bye,
Bye, Nick.
everyone.
Good to see you.